Now in this chapter we're going to look at some basic SEO concepts. The first is, how do search engines actually work? Well, the search engine will look at each individual page within your website and try and figure out what it's about. It'll then take the information back to Google, and then Google has to rank those pages against all your competitors' pages. So the first thing you need to do is to start thinking like a search engine. You know, if you were a search engine, what would annoy you and what would you reward? So when you write every single page, look at it from a visitor point of view, but also look at it from a search engine point of view. If you play by the rules and make it easy for the search engine to figure out what your website's about, you'll find you get listed more prominently within search engine results. It sounds very simple, but it is true. So for example, let's say you've got some pictures, some images on your page. Then if you just simply upload the pictures, if they have a silly file name, something like picture001.jpg, that tells nothing, it tells Google nothing about the image. So what you can do is just do some simple things. We're just talking about pictures and we're thinking about search engines. So if we assume that Google has no idea what a picture is actually about, you need to help it. So by giving it a file name, that's an obvious thing that most people don't bother with. So that's the first thing. Once it's uploaded to your website, then you can use what are called alt tags. We'll look at these later, but they're basically little tags that you can easily add in something like WordPress, and it basically supplies extra information about the picture to Google. And simply by combining the image name, the file name, along with the alt tag, all of a sudden Google understands what the picture is about. And then provided that information also tallies with the text on the page, because that's very important, so everything's on message, at that point Google has a much better idea of what the thing is about, what the page is about. It's taking extra information from your pictures. So as we'll see later, actually using pictures is very, very good from an SEO point of view. But always you've got to think of it from Google's point of view. Only last week a customer came to me and they had a website. I forget exactly what it's about, it's not really important, but the point was the website, at first glance it looked like it had a fair bit of text on it. In actual fact, most of the text turned out to be a picture of text, if you see what I mean. So it wasn't real text, it was text contained within a picture, and there was absolutely no sort of information for Google as to what the text was in this picture, if you see what I mean. So as a result, Google had really no clue as to what the page was about, because there's very little real text on it. Most of it consists of this large picture, which shows a picture containing words basically, but as images. So that was a good example of how not to do things. You have to have lots of text and lots of pictures, and as we'll see later, all sorts of other things like documents and videos really help. But the key thing is, think of it from Google's point of view. If you make it as easy as possible for Google to figure out what your page is about, then you're going to do well in the search engines. Very simple, but it's very true. The other thing to remember is that Google's don't rank websites as such. What they're doing is they're ranking web pages. It's the web pages that are going to show up in the search engine results. What this means is that every single page on your website can actually be optimized to a different phrase. So in my case, I do SEO training in Perth, so I can have maybe my home page optimized for that particular phrase, and then I could have other pages optimized for something similar but slightly different, maybe SEO seminars or SEO tutorials, or maybe online SEO training. You kind of get the idea. So that's another crucial thing that you should sort of take on board, that every single page is an opportunity to optimize for a different keyword phrase. Again, a very common mistake that I see is over and over again, in fact, is a lot of people try and cram absolutely everything into the home page, and as a result, Google looks at all this conflicting information, and it basically gives Google a headache. It has no idea really what the page is about. So as I said, in my case, my home page for my SEO training.com.au website, which is really focused on local training here in Perth, it's very definitely focused on SEO training. As I say, other pages for other things, maybe WordPress training or YouTube training or seminars or online training, whatever it happens to be. But, separate out all the different pages, create as many pages as you need, and really optimize each individual page for a different keyword phrase, which hopefully will get found in the Google search results. As I mentioned, there's about 200 factors that go into the mix. Some are huge, like the title, which I've already mentioned. Then there's others that have a very small effect. Others have positive effects, some have negative effects. So for instance, if you've got a very fast loading web speed, that's good. If you've got a slow loading web speed, that's bad, and it's going to help you. So, it's very important that you do understand these different factors, and even the ones that just have a small effect, try and get them all right. Try and get as many of these things right as possible. And the analogy I like to think about is, if you've got a jar in the kitchen, over a period of time you put pennies in there and occasionally put some notes in there, then at the end of 6 months, it's astonishing how much money you can actually find in your large jar. I mean, obviously the notes are nice, but the point is the coins add up as well. And that's the same with SEO. All the little things, they do add up. And, done right, as long as you don't over-optimize, which is bad. So if you do SEO, good SEO within reason, all the little things add up, and before you know it, you're on the first page. But as I say, always with the caveat that not everyone can be on the first page. So, sometimes you just have to accept that for your chosen phrase, you're not going to get onto the first page. Maybe it's just too much competition. Maybe there's too many other large companies who are, just throwing money at the SEO and doing everything right. In which case, as I say, settle for a different phrase. But generally, for at least some phrases that are relevant to your business, you should get onto the first page. Now, if we're talking about basic SEO, you've got to make sure that you do at least mention your keyword phrases within the body text. There's all the other techniques which we're going to sort of talk about in the course, but at the most basic level of SEO, if you don't have the words actually appearing, within the viewable page on your website, then you're not going to show up too well for those. I still get people coming to me, for instance, saying, "Oh, I've got maybe a personal injury business." They're lawyers, and they don't show up so well for a particular suburb. When I look at their website, nowhere does that particular suburb name actually show up in the website. So big surprise, they don't show up for that particular suburb. That's a kind of obvious example, but it does kind of illustrate the point. As I mentioned a while ago, use pictures, documents, and videos. So most people, when they're talking about SEO, they're purely thinking web pages. As we'll see, if you don't think documents, pictures and videos, you are missing out big time. So that sounds maybe a little bit confusing at the moment, but stick with the course and you'll see what I mean. By the end of the course, you'll be producing documents, videos, pictures, and anything else you can think of, because it all goes into the mix. Social media. Some people like social media, some not so much. I like websites, I like YouTube. I'm not a huge fan of Facebook, and to be honest, I hate Twitter. I mean, look at the people that use it, enough said. That said, from a marketing point of view, some people find Facebook and Twitter absolutely brilliant. It depends on your business. As far as links are concerned, back in the day, it was purely the number of links that were important. These days, there's a number of caveats with links. Links have got to come from good websites, good quality websites, and also they've got to be ideally relevant to what you do. So for instance, if I'm doing SEO training and I've got 300 links from different hairdressing websites, Google's going to say, A, it looks suspicious, and B, that there's no sense in this. It doesn't make any sense. So, if I have links for, say, a training business from, say, universities and colleges, Google's going to say, that's much more interesting and I'll get much more benefit from it.